How's it going, guys? Coffee here. Today I wanted to talk about the Boneshatter Slayer League Starter that I plan to be playing and my recommendations for the build. This build can get started very easily. Like the gear that you're kind of looking at, even just in the screenshot here, is probably under one div. Maybe not this axe. This axe is at 750, but if you were to get like a 600 DPS axe like this, you'd be looking at about one divine total or less to make it. I think if we pull up the Craft of Exile on this, it's saying it would cost, like, typically on average is going to cost you 25 chaos. At most it'd be costing you about 100. And basically all this is that we're going for with this is just we're basically using a Screaming Essence of Contempt, and we're rolling for either tier 3 increased fizz, tier 3 hybrid, or tier 3 attack speed. Basically whatever we hit, we're either crafting the attack speed or crafting the percent fizz, whatever we end up hitting. Based off of that, that's going to give you an axe around 200 or around 600 DPS, which is more than enough to carry you until you can basically start actually crafting an axe with deafening essences and actually multi-modding and like locking down prefixes and actually making like a veiled craft. Outside of that, though, let's go ahead and go into the build. The core of the build here and why we are running it on Slayer is because of the interaction between Tainted Pact and Writhing Jar. Tainted Pact itself, if we actually look at the things here, what do we got to? We got a ninja. So if we actually look at the prices here of Tainted Pact, this is like a tier 4 unique. You've probably seen a ton of these if you played this last league. They drop all the time. They are 1 to 2C on league start because they drop all the time. They start dropping really early, and they're not good for anyone except this specific Slayer build. Same thing goes for the Golden Rule, which is the other item in this. These are going to be just a couple chaos on starting on day 1. As you can see here, three chaos like on day 1, or you can literally just start volleying Viridian Jewels yourself, and you'll probably hit one of these really fast. So the core of how this interaction works here, as you can see with Tainted Pact, taking chaos damage over time heals you instead while you're leeching life. And the Golden Rule here, what this says is that poisons you inflict are reflected back to you, as well as bleeding you inflict is reflected back to you. Because of this, you have to ensure that you are not running vulnerability or running any other source of bleeding. If you happen to be running a source of bleeding, or you end up having to craft an axe that ends up having a source of bleeding chance on it, then you will need to just run Endless Hunger instead of Headsman, or you'll just have to be really on top of using your flasks to ensure that you're clearing your bleeding, because the bleeds will last longer than your poisons. Your poisons itself, so if you look here, the way this interaction works is when you're attacking monsters, you have a poison chance because of your weapon, because of your gloves, as well as a little bit from some jewels. You will be poisoning yourself. And as you can see here, every single poison is giving, at this point, this is already 18,000 DPS per poison. Typically, you'll end up having about 10 poisons on yourself. So if you're looking at that, that's 180,000 HP a second. 180,000 life a second, which is more than enough, of course, to sustain any amount of trauma stacks you're getting, as well as anything else. This combination isn't new. This Tainted Pact Golden Rule setup has been around for a couple leagues, so if you look around on YouTube, I'm sure you can find other videos of people using this exact setup to face tank basically everything in Ubers or anything else. So there's nothing new there. But it is an interaction that not everybody really has been taking advantage of. And because of that, the entire setup is still really affordable. And again, this is a build that you can get yourself up and running for under 1 divine. And you can really get yourself in there, farming a lot of maps, and then use it to farm the currency to play some of the new stuff that is coming around with all of the new gems and everything that are coming out, which is basically my plan. I'm going to start on something safe, farm the currency, and then I'll move on to another build after that. But so the core of the build here, what we're doing, we are running Boneshatter. for this, you will want to level with Splitting Steel until level 41. If you look at the new patch notes here, they have buffed Splitting Steel here. So if we go to Splitting Steel, Splitting, if it would help if I could spell it correctly here. So if you see Splitting Steel here, it did end up getting a buff. So it no longer consumes steel shards or grants Call of Steel, and it no longer has this line here, which is projectiles, which is split deal 35% less damage. That's effectively a 35% more damage buff for clear, which is going to help a ton while leveling. So typically you would move off of Splitting Steel and you'd end up moving over to like Spectral Helix or Sunder for leveling, but I'm thinking with the buffs that are going to be capping to Splitting Steel, you're going to end up wanting to just stay on this all the way until Act 6 when you do end up swapping over to Boneshatter. If Splitting Steel still doesn't feel okay enough, even with the buff, then you can always again just level with Sunder, or you can level with Spectral Helix. It really comes down to personal preference at that point. The other big thing that is affecting Boneshatter this league is the skill itself is getting a huge buff due to quality. So quality is now giving you 1% more damage per trauma. On this build currently, you would be able to sustain, on this one it'd be over 36 stacks of trauma, because every trauma lasts 6 seconds, and if you're hitting 6 times a second, that would be over 36. For the configuration, I have it set at just 30 stacks. And then with that, this is the 30% more damage to go along with. That is the effect that you would be getting with the new Boneshatter quality. Along with that here, we are just running a setup here with just getting our max rage. I don't have this even ticked for using Berserk. I do actually have it with Berserk in this one. If you do have Berserk on, then of course your damage is going to be higher. Without it, you're still around 10 or around 9 million here with this 750 axe. When you first start out, you'll probably be closer here to about 7 million, but that's still more than enough for early leveling, and then you'll basically be able to craft yourself a better axe fairly quickly. When it comes to things, pretty much all you're looking for on your gear, on everything, you're basically going to be looking for life, accuracy, and suppression on basically everything that you can possibly get it on. And then on your rings, you just need to make sure you have a prefix open for the reduced mana cost on your rings, because we're really trying to make sure our mana cost is staying as close as possible to 0. And then same thing goes as like an alternate bonus here. If we're trying to avoid shock, we want to try to get this crafted on boots as well as on a jewel here. This is like really end game stuff. You don't need to worry about this early on. You can just basically accept the fact that you might get shocked, or just make sure you have it on a flask or something else instead. Your jewels themselves, you're just going to be looking at poison chance, max life, attack speed, and fizz damage. And then for the tree here, again, I included it here. You're pretty much just pathing over here over to call to arms, and for the fortify here, for melee hits fortify, this is basically going to take you act 1 to 6, like right where you end up swapping into Boneshatter. And then after that, then you end up having some pathing over here where you end up pathing up all the way to Resolute Technique, picking up the other axe nodes over here on the way, and then going into Act 10, we start picking up the nodes for Panopticon and all of the totem buffs, and then at that point you end up swapping into your end game transition. At the end game is basically once you get into maps and get your first like 5 or 6 chaos is when you'll actually go by Tainted Pact and Golden Rule. And then at this point you should already have your Brutal Fervor at that point, which is basically the main thing you need to ensure you're having that for your Tainted Pact and Golden Rule setup. So that's just Cruel Lab itself there. So you're going to want to start with Impact, then pick up Brutal Fervor, and then pick up Bane of Legends and get Headsman for that little bit of extra clear speed. Yeah, other than that, the build is extremely smooth, extremely fast. You're pretty much just leap slamming around and one-tapping everything with the packs. With the new Ascendancies that we are getting, basically any of them are going to end up being really, really good on this build. The Warlock one that I mentioned in the video from yesterday that does summon Phantasms has the potential to be offering double damage for for bossing, presuming there isn't a cooldown on that ability. There's no mention of any cooldown on the spawn of them right now, but we don't know what that cooldown is going to end up being. We're just going to have to wait and see and actually test it in game. Luckily, you can swap trees whenever you want. So if it's not going to be that one, then it might end up being the one where you just end up running tinctures until you end up getting really good charms, and then you'll swap to the charm tree. With that, we'll have to basically run it, and then I'll have to update you guys in a video to let you guys know. Outside of that, you want to ensure that you're running a Writhing Jar or two, just to ensure that you always have some extra monsters to end up proccing if you want to get a self-poison back up on yourself. Using this is going to end up getting some flasks. Some people will just run more than one Writhing Jar for bossing, things like that, but typically one is just enough to ensure that you always have something to hit if you want to just make sure you get leeches up and things like that. For those that are worried about killing yourself with poisons, it is important to know that your poisons are only going to last upwards of 6 seconds, or 2.5 seconds at most, and then your trauma stacks are going to end up lasting 6 seconds. But the reason why you can't have anything with bleeding on it is your bleeds durations are going to be about double the duration of your poisons, and the bleed damage is going to be enough that it would kill you if the poisons were down. So because of that, if you aren't running the Warlock tree with its own like mark and curse on it, then you would end up wanting to just run Punishment instead. If you want to run anything on a cast one damage curse, if you see here, like the actual, if the monster's on low life, the damage does go up quite a bit, but you probably won't end up really needing to use that. You could always run Warlord's Mark or something instead if you really wanted to, but you just ensure that you aren't running Vulnerability, because you'd notice a lot of differences or a lot of issues if you did. Early on, if you are needing your poison chance and you are just using your first starter axe, which is just going to be an axe crafted with essences, like you're just going to take you're going to start with Screaming Essences, and basically until you hit anything, you're just Screaming Essence until you hit a decent axe, and you're just going to go craft % fizz on it, and you're just going to go with that. If you are running an axe that doesn't have poison chance starting off, and you are just trying to run the invulnerable setup with Tainted Pact and Golden Rule, then you would just take off Pride and just run a Herald of Agony instead at that point, early on, to carry you until you get to the point where you actually start getting your poison chance from your gloves, crafted on there with Eater of Worlds and Exarch influence. And then same thing for getting it on your jewels, things like that. At the end game, again, best case scenario, you do have it here on an actual axe. But if you can't get the poison on hit on an axe, just go with a higher DPS axe. That's always fine as well. The more poison chance you have, the smoother it is. But you hit frequently enough that you only realistically need maybe 1 or 2 poisons on yourself in order to basically be fully sustained. Everything else is just like super overkill. So, yeah. If you have any questions about the build, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll be more than happy to help. And other than that, I left a few little notes in here just in regards to buying Golden Rule, Tainted Pact, and the things with Herald of Agony, and then like crafting your weapons while you're leveling. You're pretty much just using the vendor recipes while you're leveling, upgrading and looking for new axes while you're going through. You can check the wiki and things like that to see exactly what levels these are going on. But the leveling's pretty smooth on it. You're pretty much just buying a new weapon, using the recipe, and then just kind of moving forward and bashing everything in your way. So, again, have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And other than that, see you in the next one.